There's a lot of things to consider if you're looking at sales engineering as a possible career path. Today, I wanted to talk about some of the most common misconceptions about sales engineering so you're better aligned to actually break in, maybe transition from another career altogether, or start your journey with the ultimate goal of becoming a sales engineer. Very quickly, if you're not aware, a sales engineer helps the sales team sell a product. There are many responsibilities that they may have, but among the most common and most required are being able to demo a product, being able to talk to a customer in much greater depth about their needs, about their requirements. And then oftentimes the sales engineer is usually leading a lot of the effort for a customer as they're testing the product, making sure it works, making sure they're getting the desired outcome that your company is promising in the first place and beyond. The reason that I'm making this video is that a lot of people that have messaged me, have emailed me, asking me, should I go into sales? Should I go into sales engineering? Often aren't clear on the requirements, the types of roles that fit their background, and really the reality of what's required to break in even in the first place. I myself was an engineer for 3 years before now being in a dedicated sales role for 4 years. I had the opportunity to go the sales engineering path, ultimately chose tech sales, which I think was the right decision for me. But that said, I think the first major point that I want everyone to know when looking at sales engineering is that not every sales engineering job is created equal. This is not a bad thing. This is not to say that some jobs suck and others are great, but I do think that there's a very common misconception that if you want to be a sales engineer, you can apply to any sales engineering role that you want. And I just want to save you a lot of time and really create a distinction that there are companies that are selling marketing tools, sales tools, human resources tools that are a software as a service and a tech product that don't require a technical background to become a sales engineer. This is because you're selling to marketers, to salespeople, to people who are not coding on a daily basis, and you may very well be able to break in as a sales engineer on that path. But one of the biggest misconceptions that I see is people think that you can become a sales engineer pretty much at any company with any background. And I'm just being brutally honest for the sake of saving you time. If you want to become a sales engineer at a highly technical company that's selling an engineering tool that requires coding, that requires in-depth specialized technical knowledge, you need an engineering degree, or you can also go the route of a potential boot camp. But in that case, you probably need a few years of industry experience before becoming a dedicated sales engineer. And in my own case, I was a support engineer right out of college, which is how I broke into tech. It had some elements that were similar to sales engineering, but oftentimes I saw that the engineers I worked with, again, that were support engineers and customer support, we worked in that role for usually 1.5 to 3 years before having the opportunity to then become a sales engineer because you'd had a lot of experience talking to customers. You'd had the opportunity to go really deep and learn a lot of the ins and outs of the highly technical things that are required to sell a very engineering heavy product. So just summarizing that first major point is you can become a sales engineer with a lot of types of backgrounds. But if you're going for that highly technical role, you may often have to get a degree or a boot camp. And on top of that, you may have to get a year or two of experience in a customer support or support engineering role versus I've seen other companies, just one that comes to mind is like a sales tool like Gong, right? I have seen cases of SDRs that were an SDR there for a year and a half, learned a lot about the product in the background because it's not super technical, doesn't require in-depth engineering knowledge, and then we're able to become sales engineers. But this also brings me to my next point, and I kind of mentioned it already, which is there is not a clear path to sales engineering. And I see people get lost or they're looking for that one thing to do. And if you've been following my channel, watching my videos, or interested in the tech sales engineering space for a while, you're probably aware that the SDR position is the entry-level role for tech sales. But that being said, there's not really an entry-level sales engineering role. And I've seen cases where people are able to break in as sales engineers. Again, oftentimes it's at these low-code or no-code tools that don't require engineering experience. But I have seen cases, I'm going to link this in the description as well. I interviewed someone named Devin that had a mechanical engineering degree, wasn't totally sold on that career, became an SDR, made it very clear to the leadership team that they wanted to become a sales engineer, and again, was working as an SDR, but over the course of a year and a half, learned a lot of the hard skills specific to their technology, and then became a sales engineer. I mentioned my own case, having been a support engineer for a year and a half to 3 years. A lot of my colleagues then made that transition, And I've worked with sales engineers that had even as much as 10 years of experience, ultimately transitioning to sales engineering after having a lot of in-depth and direct engineering experience. There's no one size fits all, and it's not to say that you need 5 to 10 years of experience, but I will tell you just flat out, sales engineering is not as easy to break into as tech sales. So if you want to break into tech, you're looking at tech sales and sales engineering. If you don't have an engineering background, your best bet might be to become an SDR and continue learning the skills, communicate with your leadership that sales engineering is the long-term goal, and put in the effort to get there within a year or two. But sometimes, I'm just going to be honest with you, it's not going to happen right out of the gate. But that being said, more power to you. I'm rooting for you and I want you to accomplish that goal. But this also brings me to my third major point and misconception, which is a lot of people think that I just need to be able to demo a product and I'll become a good sales engineer. And that is just one small sliver of the requirements for the role. And I mentioned earlier that oftentimes sales engineers have a lot of industry experience, or maybe they have a specialized degree, and that's great and serves them well. But a lot of times the companies that are very picky about who they hire for sales engineers is because beyond the demo, there are so many things that you just have to learn through industry experience to be able to speak to and become a very quality sales engineer. So for example, I sell a rather technical tool that interacts with a lot of tools in a customer's environment. And a sales engineer, sure, they can demo the product and that helps a lot. But oftentimes a lot of the conversations are, how does it integrate with this tool? How is it going to impact our security stance? Do you have these different types of compliances, right? And there's a lot of scenarios that a sales engineer that has industry or specific knowledge is going to be able to answer and be able to walk a customer through beyond just showing them the ins and outs of the product. And again, knowing the product, demoing the product is a solid and needed part of the job. But operating at a high level requires you to lead a customer through many different things that go beyond just showing them the product or just saying, here's how it works with our product, right? If they truly buy your tool and adopt it at an organizational level, it's going to impact so many people's workflows. It's going to impact the security team who now has to vet this tool and make sure that it doesn't expose any risk to the company as a whole. There's so many factors that come into play from a technical perspective that if you just think that all you have to do is demo the product, all I've got to do is show someone that I can learn how to demo the product, that's a great start. But you've got to keep building that breadth of knowledge. And the best sales engineers that I work with are always learning, always asking great questions, and they're always able to speak to not just the product itself, but the broader implications as well. And also a common question that I get from others is, what makes someone a better fit for sales? What makes them a better fit for sales engineering? Or should I leave my engineering career and go to sales engineering altogether? And there's no one fit here. There's no one perfect answer. But I would tell you that the way that I thought about it myself when looking at sales engineering and tech sales was a combination of a few different things. So for one, from a lifestyle perspective, sales engineers have more of their salary guaranteed up front. They're going to get 70 to maybe 90% of their salary guaranteed, with 10 to 30% being commission. Whereas me in a direct tech sales role and almost every position in the industry, 50% of your salary is guaranteed. The other 50% is based on your performance. And again, that may change here and there, but that's a pretty standard distribution. And so as a sales engineer, it's great. It's a very lucrative career, I might add. But for instance, as an account executive, I have more upside if there's a year where I hit 200 or 300% of my number. There are cases where I could make $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 in a year. And there's reps out there that are making $1 million a year. Whereas a sales engineer, you still have some commission, but if all you're getting is 10 or 30% commission versus 50% of my salary is based on commission, I have much higher upside. And on those blowout years, I'm going to make a lot more money than you. But that said, obviously the market's tough right now. There's situations where being a sales engineer can be more lucrative. And my broader point being is if you're thinking about sales engineering, maybe you're an engineer, or you're like, should I go into tech sales? Should I go into sales engineering? That's a huge part of it. Do you want more of your salary guaranteed? Do you want and find more comfort in knowing that at the end of the day, you're going to have more money up front and you have less highs and lows, less variance in your compensation? Versus me, especially when I first made that transition, I really wanted the high upside of tech sales and I was willing to try it for a few years, which I'm very glad I did and I'm still going to do for many years to come. That was more appealing to me than the guaranteed nature of sales engineering. And I think this also speaks to a broader temperament, right? If you like going a little bit deeper into details, if you're an engineer right now, maybe fed up with being an engineer for 8 to 10 hours a day and you want to do something different but don't want to go full sales, that could be a good path. Sales, you're exposed to a lot of risk. You have a lot of variables that are outside of your control. And for instance, if I'm working a deal for 6 to 9 months and that company cancels budget or the CTO resigns or whatever it might be, all of that work is gone and all of that responsibility falls on my shoulders. I have not performed as an account executive in a direct tech sales role because of that situation. Whereas a sales engineer, yes, there is commission. Yes, you want to hit quota and help your reps achieve. And all that to say, you're shielded from a lot of the risk, a lot of the highs and lows that sales provides. And just bringing this all together again, the reason that I like direct sales over sales engineering is because there is more upside as well. And I am a very competitive person. I also don't like going into the hardcore weeds of engineering or the ins and outs of a specific product, whether it's engineering or not. And while I do have the aptitude to demo my product and show very high level things, I enjoy the other elements of sales where I have to navigate into an account. I have to help other stakeholders that may be technical, maybe not be technical, understand the potential value of our product, which you're not going to do as much in sales engineering. And you're going to be much more focused on the product, much more focused on making sure a core team really understands how to use it, really gets a lot out of that product. And if you find a lot of value and fulfillment in that versus trying to chase different people in an account, trying to really align tons of different people, then sales engineering could be a great path. And I see many people do very well financially because they're an incredible sales engineer. The last thing I'd say on this note of the types of temperament, I will say from a skill set, sales engineers on average are much more defensible in the job market and much more highly sought after than a direct salesperson. This is not always the case. There's always a need for great salespeople, and this difference isn't substantially huge. But if you're a great sales engineer, that is a really difficult skill set to come by, especially in the engineering world. It's really difficult to find someone who can write lines of code, who can really understand deeper technical concepts, and also communicate with prospects in a way that facilitates a strong sales motion and gets a lot of buy-in across the organization. So again, no one-size-fits-all answer there, but I hope that helps you better understand if you're trying to make that decision yourself. And also, again, I'm not trying to discourage anyone from going after the career, but to my earlier points on what it takes to actually break in, what companies are actually looking for in the role itself, I hope that helps better set expectations for you so you can spend your energy going after the companies that you're a great fit for, as opposed to applying to any and every company when, if you had been really focused, if you had gone after the skills that made you a great candidate for these types of companies versus another, you would have had much quicker and better success. So if you have questions, comment below. Happy to facilitate that conversation. And I also want to call out again in the description, I've interviewed multiple sales engineers on the channel and want to, one, thank them for their perspective, but two, call those out because I know you'll get a lot of value if you're looking at that career path yourself. But I hope you got a lot out of this video as well. Appreciate your time and we'll see you next week.